So good morning. Today is the last of the daily series on COVID-19, the daily YouTube lives. We will be covering them. The bottom line is we are, this is the last in our series on the daily series for COVID-19. Today we're covering surveillance and privacy in the time of COVID-19. There's going to be more surveillance. There's going to be more challenges to privacy. And again, this whole thing of surveillance, privacy, lockdown has become a major political battle. I'm trying to not report on that stuff, but mostly report on the science, the public health issues associated with these things. For the next week, we'll have two. We'll have one on Wednesday and one on Friday. The one on Wednesday is not so much on COVID-19. It's going to be with Doug Thompson. You remember the dentist that started and runs the Wellness Dentistry Network. Doug has come on a couple of times and done some popular shows with us. He's been marketed by a few guys that are wanting him to help market nitric oxide supplements. Nitric oxide is a big deal. There have been some Nobel Prizes awarded for discoveries of nitric oxide. In fact, 3 people received it at the same time. Won't go into that. The real question, though, is on a practical basis, what makes sense in terms of, does supplementation make sense? Does use of mouthwash decrease nitric oxide? In fact, there's a YouTube live with an attractive blonde female doctor talking about that's going to impact male function. And it's again, it gets into a lot. We're not going to go into that piece, but we are going to talk about nitric oxide supplementation and why it's important and whether supplementation makes sense. There's no question that some things that you ingest, like beets, beetroots, and stuff like that, do actually have a significant impact on arterial health. But do the supplements? Again, we'll talk about it. On next Friday, we will have a YouTube live. Then the following week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, then we'll get back to Wednesday in terms of the schedule. I'm not going to cover the upcoming topics other than the one I just covered, the nitric oxide. And we're not going to rehash the previous topics. Take a look if you're interested. Covered more than we ever thought we'd want to cover about one infectious disease, COVID-19. I think a lot of people are getting worn out on this issue, myself included. The other thing is I'm spending more and more time on a personal basis helping people helping America get back to work in Canada and Europe and several other locations. We're doing more and more work with employers on how to engineer this safely in terms of maximum ability to return to the work environment, to get work done, to reconfigure the economy, and to do all that safely. So here is the schedule for the next 2 weeks: Wednesday, Friday, then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Wednesdays after that. I'm not going to go over in detail on the updates. Remdesivir, no new news on that. The Vital patch, no news on that. At-home test kit, looking good so far. No new news on the Roche or Abbott tests. Nothing new on the webinars, other than to just, again, let you know, we've got several webinars that are coming up. Number one, do you have prediabetes, diabetes? The CDC used to think it was 30% of adults 60 and older, and new information coming out over the past couple of years would indicate it's not 30%. It's more like 50%. And it's not 60 and older, it's 30 and older. Why is prediabetes important? Because that's the root cause for rotting our arteries, burning the lining of our arteries, and causing plaque, which is the root cause for heart attack, stroke, kidney disease, blindness, you name it. So the majority of things that are chronic illnesses, quote, normal, end quote, aging, the things that kill us and disable us. Other webinars that we have, if you've had a CIMT, you may not have the, you've got a CIMT, but you don't know how to interpret it. We've got a webinar where we can help you with that. A lot of people have asked us a lot about supplements. No, supplements are, you can't supplement your way out of a healthy life, out of a lifestyle problem, but supplements can often help quite a bit. So I've had a lot of requests and discussions about what are the best supplements to take, when do you take them, what are the doses, how do they work? If you're curious about that, again, just check in with our folks about how to get into the supplements. I know that several people, Chuck, for example, got very interested in the monthly subscription plan. We've got a couple of monthly subscription plans. We've been working on these for over a year. We ended up saying, yeah, but why don't we tweak it this way, tweak it that way, make it a little bit more. Bottom line is we decided we just needed to put the subscription plans out there, the membership plans. It's a great way to get ongoing, updated information and information specific to you and your care. For example, have you been interested in getting a complete workup, a complete follow-up, but our prices are just too high? There's a way to get started into that program and start taking it a chunk at a time rather than all at once. And that's through the membership plans. So for those of you who are interested in getting a little bit deeper in terms of taking charge of your own health, adding a couple of decades of healthy life, this is a great cost-effective way to do it. So we'll get to the topic of, is there a big brother? You know, was it George Orwell? Big Brother, involved in COVID-19 surveillance and contact tracing. We'll deal with that in just a minute, right after Lori gives us the water ball. So COVID-19 surveillance technology, and I think it's George Orwell's Big Brother. The demand for surveillance technology has surged because of COVID-19. Thermal camera maker FLIR Systems saw its stock rise 60% in April because of increased demand. And I will tell you, with the work that we're doing with employers, there are a lot of new high-tech imaging systems. I covered those, gosh, 2 months ago, where you go back and you look at the YouTube videos of schools in Korea and China where they've got the hand monitor and they're putting it close to the child's forehead. The technology is totally different that's available. Groups like the NFL have already purchased these kind of systems where it's a thermal camera. You can get 60 or 100 or even 200 people per minute through that camera. It takes a thermal picture. it gives you some ID information on the individual as well as their temperature. So don't be surprised if you start finding yourself when you go into a big building, as you see on this picture right here, that looks like maybe a basketball arena, going through security requiring that you get a thermal scan. Companies are using software to monitor employees working from home. Students are being watched remotely through exam monitoring software. While Bluetooth has been used to track crowd sizes in malls, it's now being used to enable contact tracing apps. So as you can see, this one is leaning a little bit more towards the technology side of things. And again, it comes from an article from CNET. As we've covered before, we've covered CNET a few times in the technology approach. As companies beef up surveillance with technologies like thermal cameras, facial recognition, drones, contact tracing apps, and mobile location tracking, all of these have raised concerns about privacy. Software company Vantique has been repurposing its tools to focus on technology tied to tracing COVID-19. Before COVID-19, it was supplying companies with monitoring tools to detect environmental or safety issues in buildings. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused a spike in demand for Vantique's tools. Since March, its tools have been used in social distancing programs, like in an app, to reserve a slot at a food market. In China, the company helped build a quote, real-time coronavirus tracking system, end quote, called G-Connect. The app relies on thermal cameras and facial recognition and has been sold to a mining company and retail stores in China. Such tools represent the double-sided nature of the effort to contain the spread of coronavirus. While technology promises to help, experts warn it also comes at the cost of privacy. There is no question. I mean, again, I've done public health for over close to 40 years now, and there's always going to be challenges in terms of personal freedoms and individual freedoms and the ability to screen and protect the public's health. Now back to the script. While technology promises to help, expert warns it comes at the cost of privacy. More worrisome is the notice that the pandemic-driven use of surveillance would become the new normal. And I think most of us expect a lot of that to happen in China because they come from a centuries, millennia-long history of the government having no problem at all with surveillance and issues related to personal freedom. We always risk that if you create a new set of norms and about what to expect on privacy, those norms last. That's a quote from Mark Sermon, executive director of Firefox maker Mozilla. You remember Mozilla is that open software for a web browser. We could be left with a legacy. The choice to make now is what legacy we want. Currently, there are no federal laws on how data privacy is to be handled. In April, lawmakers proposed the COVID-19 Consumer Data Protection Act. Vantique CEO Marty Sprinzen believes there is no going back after COVID-19. That surveillance technologies would become widely accepted because of the pandemic and the public health security issues. It's like what happened after 9/11. The security systems are going to stick around. Sprinzen said, the genie's out of the bottle. The toothpaste is out of the tube. That kind of sensing is not going to go away. Now that's Sprinzen's perspective on it, and he's got some points. But Mozilla's sermon doesn't believe that the world has crossed the point of no return yet on surveillance norms. Any decisions made in the next few years for COVID-19 will all have a privacy implication attached, Sermon said, and it'll take constant vigilance to ensure that the privacy norms are actually protecting people. This picture that you see in the bottom right, we covered this a couple of times. The first time, again, I think was a couple of months ago when China started linking QR codes, facial recognition, and the ability to buy public transportation tickets. That's what's going on there. This individual has to use a QR code and I believe facial recognition in order to be able to purchase a subway ticket. So, Lori, are you able to get the video up?
So we've seen, for example, with coronavirus, an extraordinary response from the Singaporean government that has probably done a better job of containing coronavirus in the early days than any other country out there. In part, extraordinary surveillance.
Yeah.
Through being able to track any given individual who has tested positive, and you can know where they were and who they are, which on the one hand provides market stabilization and confidence among people that live there and travel there. And on the other hand, is really scary in terms of the lack of privacy of anybody that lives in that society and what that can mean. Obviously, again, this is just going to get stronger and stronger, these capabilities.
Yes.
How do you think about that?
So there's always a trade-off, you could say. If you want to have maximum security, there's often, minimum freedom. I mean, in China, where the coronavirus originated, I think there is a real case to be looked at whether the censorship and the systematic lack of freedom of expression and concern that people have to speak their minds may not have actually led to the spreading of the virus, because the concerned doctors were not heard. People did not feel free to speak out. Information about the virus was being censored, also online. Until this day, discussions about the virus and how the authorities handled it are continuing to be censored and tracked. So I don't think the last word has been said about the benefits of a surveillance state when it comes to a virus and a pandemic. But in general, I think the question should really be, what kind of society do we want to live in? So the contrast is that in China, their governance model has been leading and the technology is the instrument. In democracies, there's been a reluctance to apply democratic governance over technology. And in some ways, the technology is leading governance, right? It has really shown us that we need to apply governance and the rule of law proactively. And if we want to have a chance vis-a-vis these Chinese top-down controlled models, we have to show how it works in a democratic way and be sure that our societies are resilient, whether it's in the online domains where people live or offline.
Go. As you may have guessed, we're back into the question and answer. Douglas Pohl, lost you. I tell you what, my worst nightmare, my worst fears were recognized. I was trying to manage the screen, and I totally locked out my web browser, and so that's what took me down. But amazingly, we were able to get back up very quickly. So thank you, Doug. And yes, we're excited to be here. We appreciate your interest. Jim D, hey, Doc. At Rob, 99%, 51 beats per minute. One of the group asked me earlier on, is pulse ox very important for seasonal flu? It can help, but not nearly so much. Normal seasonal flu doesn't have as much of this phenomenon of the, quote, happy hypoxic, end quote. But again, I don't think it can hurt to just keep an eye on that. Lori, thank you so much for putting information out there. Folks that have questions, Lori's our nurse. She's also managing the co-hosting today. There are sometimes some challenges in some areas of the Philippines in terms of the ability to get up and rolling on the internet. Carl had a challenge this morning. So any questions from Lori? 859-757-2324. That's 859-757-2324. Dave Murphy, hello, Lori. Thanks for your help. And Joe Riley, 97% and 66 beats per minute. Good for you, Joe. James Canner had a head test yesterday. I'm assuming that's a one of those thermometer guns at my doctor's, 97.7 Fahrenheit as part of the check-in. Dave Murphy, thank you so much for the super chat. Thanks for all you're doing. Looking forward to getting my consult set up. Have a great holiday. Yep, I did some reviews for your case just a couple of days ago, Dave. I think you're aware of that. I'm looking forward to meeting and going over your case. See what's going on in terms of your actual metabolism. That's hardly ever. It's almost always some significant information and quite often some big surprises. Jim D should integrate the surveillance tech topic with nitrous oxide detection by monitoring men's zipper lines as they pass through scanners in public areas. Male predators, no doubt. Okay, Jose Fontal, time to buy a boat and go live on the ocean. Caribbean islands are great. Thank you so much, Jose, and I'd love to see you there. I'm jealous. Joe Riley, we don't have to worry about privacy. Facebook has already distributed and sold our information multiple times. Thank you, Joe. Jose, Z50. Joe, Google ANA Apple 2 with the information from our phones. No question, a lot of information coming in through telephones. Jose Fontal, where can I get a good CIMT in Orange County, California? Jose, if you will call Lori at that number that she gave you, 859-757-2324. That's 859-757-2324. Lori can help you get set up. There's really two high-quality providers that I know and trust in the U.S. You can get them a bunch of other places. There's one, for example, a third one in the Atlanta area, which we've used a few times. But the two that I know and trust are a neurologist who is located in Nashville. The only national group that I have worked with that I rely on is Todd Eldridge, ELDREDGE, and it's cardiorisk laboratories. And again, Lori can help you with getting that information. We don't have a whole lot of questions today. We've got a couple more though. End times, Coach Darren, end times, all this for a virus that less than 3% of people die from. It's more than to this than a virus. As a veteran that fought for freedom, it's truly sad. There's a lot of sad reactions to it, Coach, I would agree. And one of the things that's frustrating is, to me, there's significant over-politicization. Won't go any further than that. Gene Callagher. Do meds that slow down heartbeats reduce oxygen in the pulse oximeter? No, not significantly. They can have some impact, but that's not that. In most cases, that's not a significant issue. Thanks. It's a great question, though, Gene. Sax Girl Hornboy. Regarding the recent question regarding wind instruments, there's research ongoing in cooperation with the Bamberg Symphony in Germany. For those of you who this is just hitting totally cold, we've had conversations on several of the videos about, this is transmitted by coughing, sneezing. You get aerosol droplets in the air, droplets and aerosol. And you start thinking about, well, what about people that play wind instruments? What's going on with that? They've demonstrated using modeling that if somebody sneezes in the grocery aisle next to you, that plume of aerosol to an infectious level can travel over into your aisle in the next level. So again, what if we're talking about a brass quartet? What does that do? And if you're in the New York subway and you're walking by one of those groups in the subway that's playing their, a brass quartet, what should you be thinking? That's what Sax Girl Hornboy is talking about. Dave Murphy, my local heart hospital used to do CIMT, but no longer do them. No reason given why they stopped. I can tell you a couple of things. CIMT is like an orphan. There are, gosh, for example, in Nashville, there were probably about 300 places where you could get a routine carotid, this is the carotid artery, ultrasound. And that's looking for plaque. But only 2 of those places actually gave you a CIMT. What's the difference between an ultrasound and a plaque? The regular ultrasound, it's called Doppler or echo, is basically looking for as much plaque, a plaque where it impacts your flow of blood. To impact your flow of blood, that makes it what we call in our space a flow study. Well, flow studies flow is not really impacted either in the carotid artery or in any of the arteries until you get to like 50 to 60% occlusion or more. Now, we used to think that was what's significant, but here's what we found out in terms of research. We, meaning the general scientific medical community, 2/3 of people having a heart attack had less than 50% occlusion of flow with plaque. So that's not a great test. Unfortunately, that's the vast majority of what you get if you go to get a, quote, carotid ultrasound. And they basically just use that for consideration of whether or not to have a carotid endarterectomy, surgery on your carotid artery. That surgery is less and has been shown by science to be less and less effective compared to what we used to do. I trained with a surgeon way back, is almost, 40 years ago, 1981, a doctor named Max Rittenberry. He was in Charleston, and he basically did nothing but carotid endarterectomies, going into the carotid artery, removing plaque that they found there, and sewing the artery back up. You don't see that much anymore because the science, the evidence doesn't support it. It doesn't help. Now, so you fast forward to today, then those tests have become much less popular, although they're still done. Now, when we talk about it, though, we're talking about something else. We're talking about what's called a B mode. It's looking at any level of plaque. It's not looking at plaque just plaque if it obstructs the flow of the blood. Because any level of plaque indicates that you can get into an inflammatory state and therefore create risk for heart attack and stroke. That requires some significant software. It requires a fastidious approach to the location, because the amount of plaque that's seen in these arteries is not consistent throughout the arterial tree. It varies, so you have to know exactly which location and which direction you're approaching that artery from in order to get anything that's comparable. We do know that if you have plaque, you have significant increase in risk. There was a study, gosh, over a decade ago called the Cafés de Cave study. And basically what it showed is people that didn't have enough plaque to cause disruption in flow, but still had measurable plaque, had very significant, as in up to 40, even 60% risk for heart attack over the next 10 years. So that was a landmark study. It created a whole new focus on how to get a little bit more information regarding, do you have plaque, not do you have plaque that's already disrupting the flow of blood. Pardon me, but I think maybe I went down a 3 or 4 minute rabbit hole, but not sure that I answered your question. Not sure there is a question there. Bottom line is, because of some of the challenges in looking at CIMT, it's only been very, very recently that standards committees, medical standards committees, have started to use those. I'm gonna now that I'm started, I'm gonna have to continue down that rabbit hole. If you start the book that Todd and I are working on, hopefully it'll come out within another 3 months, maybe another 6. I'm not sure, but basically it talks about what's the best way to measure plaque. Well, number one, the most common is Framingham. It's not a measurement, it's a guess, and it's a bad guess. Number two, a stress test. Hey, doc, my brother had a heart attack, and I've got a lot of the same genes, and can we see if I'm at risk for a heart attack? Okay, well, let's do a stress test. Hope you're feeling lucky, because a negative stress test, well, let's talk about a positive stress test. 15% or more false positives, and with those folks, you go into the cath lab, you get a needle stuck into the artery in your groin. That's not a fun or non-invasive type process. Usually, if you've got that going on, you're going to find reasons to put a stent in. You're going to find plaque, and if you've got an assumption of that plaque needs to be stented, then you put a stent in. Unfortunately, that results in the patient having a false sense of security. I had a problem, the doc fixed it, I'm good now. No, not at all. The other place where you get a false sense of security is if you get a false negative stress test. Again, 15 to 30% of negative results on a stress test are false negatives. Just look it up, Google it. You'll find it on the Google snippet, location 0 on the search page. So what should you be doing then? There are 3 different technologies that are much, much better. Each of them, like everything else, has its pros and its cons. CIMT is one of them. Coronary artery calcium score is another, and an upcomer, CT angiogram. So if you got more interest in that and how to protect your own health, how to predict whether or not you're going to have a heart attack or stroke, keep your eyes out for that book. Thanks for raising the subject, Dave. Looks like I may have to go to Kansas City to get one when they start up. Sometimes you have to travel a little bit. Time to get your bagpipes back out, Doc. Great lung workout too. Not sure if you're talking about me talking so much or something else. Jose Fontal, if I want an OGTT test with insulin survey, what do I tell my doc so he prescribes it? I fear he might look at me funny and won't even know what that is. Jose, you're not alone. And in fact, that happens all the time. What you may want to do is just do that with us through the webinar. It's very easy, very simple. And here's the problem. Yes, if you go ahead and get it done with your doc and he doesn't use them, how's he going to know how to interpret it? So you don't have to switch docs. You don't have to depend on me as your doc for everything, but you may want to go in, get the correct information, the correct guidance on OGTT. And here's the other thing. About 2 patients per month these days that I'm seeing have a relatively normal OGTT, but it's taking twice the insulin to keep those blood sugar levels okay. So that's some things to think about, Jose. One other thing I would say, a couple of people have asked me about, there's a new test for insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance. It's called the insulin resistance score from CardioRisk, now owned by, part of the old Cleveland Health Labs, which is now owned by Quest. I forgot which viewer asked me about that, but they said, what do you think, Doc? Well, here's what they're doing with that. They're just doing a regular fasting glucose, A1C, and they're adding a C-peptide. C-peptide is basically just our peptide. Our, a protein is made up of peptides, amino acid, and a string of amino acids. And that's what the peptide is. Insulin is a peptide that gets cleaved in the small section is taken out of it. The other two parts of that amino acid string bond together, and they form what the insulin molecule. So if you go back and you look at the C peptide, you get a little bit more information regarding what's actually going on with you. It's really important for folks that are taking insulin. However, at the end of the day, they say that's a better test. And it may be a little bit better test than A1C and fasting glucose. You don't have to get, that's a low bar. A1C and fasting glucose. You really need to challenge your metabolism in order to get an accurate understanding of what your metabolism does when it is challenged. Other people, for example, have asked me about HOMA-IR. And the vast majority of HOMA-IR ratios are one-time ratios. Again, same problem. If you want to know how your metabolism responds to a glucose challenge, you need to measure it before, during, and after the challenge. And as I said before to Jose, you really need to be looking at insulin in addition to glucose. Amazon, my wife are about an hour. I'm guessing you mean my wife and I are about an hour from Atlanta. Thanks from the both of us. I guess you're saying, what place do you recommend that we go to for a CIMT there? Again, if you'll call Lori, she and I can give you a couple of pieces of information regarding folks in that area. Thank you, Amazon. Dave Murphy, I refuse to do a stress test. I would too, Dave. The problem is, you can say, well, is it harmless? That's assuming that a false negative is harmless and a false positive is harmless, and they're not. Ivor Cummins' boss, David Bobbitt, had a negative stress test, but actually had a 100% blockage in one artery. Thank you for sharing that, Dave. Joe Riley already won the lottery on calcium score, 7,000. That's more than a lottery, Joe. You and your metabolism had to work pretty hard to get there. Actually, Joe has shared his story with our viewers. Joe Riley, if you'll look it up, it's Joe and I did an interview, and he's got some very interesting risk factors, and he's doing some great work and some very interesting work in terms of managing them. So Google my YouTube channel and Joe, J-O-E Riley, R-E-I-L-L-Y. Thanks, Joe, for the contribution and for sharing. That's helping. Your stories help each other dramatically. Jose, Z50, time to cut all the carbs, man. Wow, 7,000. It's a big number. TS, bleached flour root cause. In Joe's case, Joe had some other significant genetic issues going on. Very significant genetic issues. So again, you may want to take a look at the rest of the facts before you offer an opinion regarding root cause. I will say this though, TS, there's no question for the vast majority of us, bleached flours, grains, big issues as we age. We may be okay eating some of those in our teens and 20s, but it's when we're surviving on a diet of way too many grains in our 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, we start getting into problems. Dave Murphy, thanks to you and the team, I've noticed you re-cataloged the YouTube videos. Yes, we're doing some work in that area. Lori's done some work. Chris has done some work. Jerry Quanticus Kurth came on originally, gosh, over a year ago, and as a volunteer, and helped us do a good bit of work in terms of changing the catalogs, developing new playlists. So thank you guys. I appreciate the interest, and we're going to go ahead and be wrapping it up. Bambi Grage. Bambi, is this the same as Bambi Able? If not, we've got two Bambis. How is heart disease diagnosed in conventional medicine? Well, I just told you, you go in, you do the questionnaire, which is not a measurement of plaque. It's a guess, and it's a bad guess. And we go into the details in the book on why Framingham's a bad guess. It's better than nothing, and it's better than, you say, well, why don't we go, there are problems with the recent data on Framingham. And you say, well, why don't we go back to the previous Framingham survey assumptions? Well, those were worse. So nothing's simple. I'm not going to go further, beyond Framingham and some of the discussions we talked about earlier. The other thing about heart disease diagnosis in conventional medicine, as all of us know, anybody watching this channel is going to know that your typical doc here at 2020 for the past couple of decades has been looking at LDL, quote, bad cholesterol, end quote. Even though most docs understand fully that half the people having a heart attack have normal, quote, normal LDL values. So they understand that that's a logic problem, but they don't know a better way to look. There are better ways. It has to do with some of the things we've talked about. So if you'd like to get that evaluated for yourself, Bambi, give us a call. We can help. T.S., we knew this in 1903. Yep, the human species can be smart, but we can also be slow learners. Okay, not the same Bambi. Thank you. It's just an unusual name, as you know. Senile Sam, is atherosclerosis a death sentence at a young age? No. That's what most people think, that it is a death sentence. They think, you know what? In your 60s, your 70s, or some people in their 50s, you can't predict it. It's just going to happen. You're going to have a heart attack or stroke, and you're going to die. That's not reality. It is not reality. And again, this channel is made up of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people who understand that message. Amazon, what's the latest date we can get the book? Oh gosh, I'd have to pin Todd down to on the date for his last edit. And if you would like to, and that's sort of like, I come up with some analogies like a grease pig contest, things like that. It's finding a needle in a haystack. It is difficult to pin Todd down to a schedule. So I can't give you that. I'm hoping within the next 6 months. BG92, right? This sec, blood glucose 92. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. And again, I appreciate the interest that you guys have shown. As Joe's saying, heart attacks are optional. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a good holiday weekend. And again, we'll look forward to seeing you next week.